Anxiety and depression present themselves in different forms, and they are a major contributor to one's ability to function at work, at home, and in social settings. The causes of these mental illnesses vary from person to person, but the commonality is in the feeling of being alone and vulnerable. And though there are services and programs available to assist individuals, the stigma attached to those who live with mental illness makes it difficult for people to openly seek help. We're in conversation now with Sarah Schneider, who has been diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression due to being alienated from her children 4 years ago. And we're also joined by Jabu Zwane, founder of the Mindset Institute. They will help us get a better understanding of mental health, of remedies that are available, and how one can just take it one step at a time. Welcome to the both of you. Sarah, thank you so much for your time. Good morning, Jabu.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me on.
Well, first and foremost, I will start with you, Sarah. You've been brave enough to come forward and share your journey. Tell us your story of being alienated from your children for 4 years.
Yeah, well, let me begin actually to give you a context. I left quite an abusive marriage 4 years ago. I have 4 children, 2 girls, 2 boys. I was a full-time stay-at-home mum, very loving and devoted mother, and obviously, you know, my children were everything. And I made the brave decision to, after 16 years of marriage, to leave, to go. And I didn't have the financial resources to really fight legally at that stage. So I managed to find a lawyer in Cape Town who helped me through the process. And looking back on it now, I had no idea what I was in for. When you're having to try and leave, let's just say, I hate using the word narcissist because it's thrown around so often these days, but leaving a narcissist who made it quite sure that if I was to go ahead with the divorce and leave the marriage, leave a toxic, abusive, destructive marriage, which I could see was actually damaging my children, staying. They always say, you know, divorce is bad for the kids. Yes, it does impact the children severely. It has a huge trauma in their lives. Staying in a marriage that is abusive is actually worse. And I made that choice to go. I didn't realize, looking back on it now, that he was going to use the children as a form of punishment and torture. So I haven't seen my kids in 4 years. I've missed birthdays, Christmases, Mother's Days, everything, Easters, you know, all the big occasions that usually are kind of with your children. And in the beginning, the anxiety was huge. The anxiety was so bad that I was shaking all the time. I couldn't write. I was having panic attacks. I couldn't eat. I lost 10 kilos pretty much in a couple of months. And so here I'm sitting with the grief of losing my 4 children. They are still alive, breathing. I'm here, but I'm dead to them. So I often say to people who kind of ask, you know, how do you cope? And I say, well, I don't actually know, but it would be easier for me, in a way, this sounds really bizarre, it would be easier for me to know that they weren't alive. I can't believe I could say that, because the grief of knowing that I'm here and they are there and their lives are continuing and they're growing up and they're achieving all these little milestones in their lives. It's absolutely devastating. So just to give you a context on my situation, which has led to the anxiety and then has led to severe depression.
I'm so sorry about everything that you've gone through with this case of severe parental alienation. At what point, Sarah, did you recognize that you had this extreme anxiety? You say you're living with anxiety and depression.
It was where I couldn't really function. I couldn't function at work. I had social anxiety, so going out anywhere was kind of scary. And then it got to a point where I was starting to have suicidal thoughts. I kind of got to the stage where I thought, you know, with depression, anxiety is very different to depression. Depression is a point where you just think, what's the point? It's a space of despair, that there's nothing that you can do to fix the situation. It's that sense of, you have a dream and you scream, but nothing comes out. That's the feeling that you have. It's this being completely paralyzed in terms of being able to fix the situation or fix yourself. And there's a lot of shame that goes around that, the depression of, snap out of it. You can't snap out of depression. It's a
mental
slow,
health.
gradual process. You don't just wake up one day with depression.
Yeah,
it creeps up on you slowly and slowly and slowly and slowly, and then
a mental illness.
Your body just shuts down, and it like I think you mentioned earlier, it is a sense of shame, loneliness, and fear, because you don't know what's going on with yourself. You just think, what's happened to me? I used to be, like energetic and positive and productive, and suddenly you look at yourself and think, what's happened to me?
In what ways, Sarah, did the anxiety and the depression affect your day-to-day existence? Because it manifests itself in so many different ways in different people.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually, because like I mentioned earlier, it's not a light switch. I found things like, I used to run a lot. I was a runner, or I loved exercising, and I just stopped. I just couldn't. Nothing brought me joy. Things that made me happy or made me excited, nothing did it. There was just no joy. And then you start blaming yourself, because you think, well, I used to run 6Ks a day, and now I can't even get out of bed in the morning. Going and having meetings, I was a complete wreck. And so it's like I say, it goes with a lot of shame and a lot of fear. And I always say, with anxiety and depression, so anxiety is a fear of the future. So anxiety is, I'm scared of what's going to happen in 2 days, next week, next month. So the anxiety is that fear, it's the fear of the future. Whereas depression is a sadness of the past. So being in that space where, whether it's regret or grief of what's happened to you in the past, that's when you get stuck in the depression. So that's how I define the two. Depression is a sadness of the past. Anxiety is a fear of the future.
All right. And someone who would understand anxiety very well, of course, would have to be you, Jabu. I mean, as a specialist, mindset specialist in particular, I'm very interested to know, I mean, you facilitated various workshops for over 50 companies, over 10 countries, 3 continents, including multinationals, institutions. So what does your work as a mindset specialist entail?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Masechaba, for the invitation. My work actually involves just helping people to develop healthy ways of thinking in these types of situations. As we also have just heard Sarah, like, the way she described what she's gone through, a big part of that that she would have noted is that the more that she got a hold of the situation in terms of understanding the details around what is anxiety, the way she described it, as far as it is connected to the future, and what is depression as far as it is connected to the past, and then the complexity of navigating what you've lost in the past, and then just thinking about, do you have the ability to handle what's going to happen in the future, or if you ever faced similar types of situations that have led you to be in that state in the first place. And so as a mindset development specialist, my job is to come up with critical ways of thinking about those types of situations and giving you tools that helps you to understand, not understand the situation, but helps you to understand yourself in terms of what is going on inside of you, and learning what sort of abilities you've got within yourself, within your community, within your environment that can help you to tackle this very serious pandemic at the moment.
It is indeed a very serious pandemic. And of course, there are varied shapes and forms of anxiety and depression, some of which require medical intervention with actual medicine administered by a doctor. But let's expand a little bit more, Jabu, on those non-invasive mind tools. You've developed over 30 mindset models. Just give me an example of what some of them actually look like in transforming the mindset. What is required?
All right. The first one is normally what happens when we're facing danger. There are 4 different things we do. Understanding the first one is that we want the situation to be eliminated. And if it cannot be eliminated, the second thing we do is that we want to avoid it. And if you can't avoid it, then we want to minimize it. And in the case where we're not able to minimize the impact of the situation, then we've got to find ways to manage with it, to cope with it. And so that's normally what happens, especially if it's a situation where a person has, if it's linked to their genetics, if it has become something a bit more severe, medically speaking, and that requires medical intervention. In that case, there would have to be chronic medication that is administered by a professional, and that is the way of coping with it. In terms of eliminating it, if you're not able to, obviously snap your fingers and then all of a sudden you're no longer depressed or no longer anxious, then you've got to find a way to avoid what causes you triggers. For example, as Sarah has mentioned, there's the issue of maybe sometimes social anxiety. So you don't want to put yourself unnecessarily in situations that will, especially for anxiety, that will trigger and create that hyperactivity in your chemicals where you are constantly nervous about, am I saying the right thing? What are these people thinking about me? Are they judging me? What are my children going to say? So you want to, manage that and avoid putting yourself in those types of situations. In terms of minimization, what you want to do is that you want to, for example, manage your diet. Don't, be drinking excessive caffeine. Don't be eating unhealthy, foods that'll depress you, that'll lead to you gaining a lot of weight, that'll lead to you not feeling good about yourself. You want to basically generate, or at least understand how the role that diet has in terms of helping you with your mental well-being and exercise, and of course having a support group. And I want to say this quickly, something quite controversial is that in terms of the support group, especially if you go into churches, for example, be careful of the kind of belief systems that they have around these types of issues, because many of those types of environments don't necessarily have professionals who understand the condition quite well, and they can allocate some type of description of what it is that can actually make you feel even more depressed by trying to say that it's a lack of faith or some kind of demonic oppression. If you are around, rather put yourself in groups, like support groups, like SADC, for example, South African Depression and Anxiety Group in South Africa, where the language that describes what you're going through is accurate and it gives you the understanding that you require so that you can feel a sense of control.
So, Sarah, when were you officially diagnosed and how are you coping?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you say that again? Sorry.
When were you officially diagnosed and how are you coping?
Officially, probably about 3 years ago. Yeah.
And what has been your coping mechanism? Because you've also indicated that at some point, I don't know if you're still off the medication or still on the medication or have gone back to the medication, but how are you coping?
So I was reluctant to, and as Jabu was saying right now, it's important not to take how you're feeling and how you operating in your life and label it too quickly. And that was my reluctance in the beginning. I didn't want to label myself as having this, you don't want to be that person that kind of is depressed or, and so when I was having severe panic attacks and palpitations and my physical body was taking strain, I actually went to see my GP, an amazing man, and he just said to me, right, you don't have to suffer. You don't have to be in the space. We can give you some medications, serotonin receptor SSRIs. So they basically try and keep the serotonin in your body longer. So I've been on that now for 3 years. I don't intend on staying on it forever.
How is
But
how
at
is
the
it
same
how is it
time,
going with that medication? How have you responded to it, and what are the side effects, if I may ask?
Side effects, not really any, to be honest. Your GP needs to obviously evaluate you and make sure that they give you the correct ones for the correct, obviously the correct dose and things like that. But it's a way of coping. And this, like Jabu said, there's other kind of ways of coping as well, whether it's exercise or eating well or surrounding yourself with positive people. That's key. And not being, like Jabu said, not being in situations where you're feeling you're being judged. That is the worst thing anyone in this position can be in, is to feeling that you're being judged and looked at and kind of labeled or things like that. So yeah, the medication definitely, for now, it's working.
All right. Jabu, what advice would you have for people, whether or not they are dealing with any sort of mental health issue, just around mental wellness and taking care of our mental health?
The first thing I'd say is that understand what causes these situations. The reality is that as human beings, we're fragile, we are limited, and we don't always have the ability to handle what happens to us. So for me, there are three main sources that make us feel like overwhelmed as people. Is that we have a strong sense of inadequacy, that we don't meet one particular standard, and then that's what I'll call shame. And shame makes you feel like you're not good enough, you don't deserve. The second thing is fear. And fear is about not having enough ability to either do for yourself what will help you make your life better, or to protect yourself against danger. Like, for example, how do you protect yourself against a spouse who is using their resources to make it look like you're not competent and make it look bad in front of people that really care, that you love and care about? Now they've got a misunderstanding of your love towards them. That can create massive amount of overwhelm. And then, of course, the factor of guilt. And guilt there is where you are constantly negotiating with yourself about whether or not you're a good person. Do you have the right character? Did you do something wrong to get yourself in this type of situation? And so those three factors then make you feel very insecure, and they put down your esteem, and they make your energies feel low and make you feel like you're not able to handle whatever's going to be coming your way. Hence, then you get very worried about the unknown. But unfortunately, with a strong structure in the past of what had happened, when you didn't really expect for certain things to happen. For example, you expected a person to stay with you and be loyal to you. Now they turn around and betray you. And now you are worried about what did you not know? And so the unknown then creates an even greater overwhelm. And so understanding that, first of all, terrible things can happen to you. Secondly, whatever little bit of control you've got, you have to exercise. You cannot just relinquish responsibility purely because of all these other factors that you have no control over. So try to win every day. Do something small every day. When I lost my wife, and then I was left with 3 kids, and I've got a daughter who's got special needs, and I was a full-time pastor who wasn't working at the time, finding myself with no financial muscle. My pastor was quite skilled in this. Said to me, just do something small every day and win at something small every day. You know, whenever you've got a little bit of strength to do anything positive, go and do that, and just slowly begin to work your way through that.
All right, we're going to leave it right there.
That's advice.
Thank you for that best advice. We're going to leave it right there. Sarah, it would be travesty of me not to ask you how far you are with your situation with your children, very briefly.
Sorry, the sound's not great. Sorry, could you say that again?
I said it would be an absolute travesty of me not to ask you how far you are with your situation with your children that you've been alienated from for so many years.
I don't know.
Very briefly, because we've run out of time. Are you anywhere near resolution?
Well, legally, I'm still in the process, and any person that understands parental alienation does realize as well it's a matter of time. To be honest with you, it's a failure of the legal system. I will say it straight out that the legal system has failed me. So it's just one day at a time.
One day at a time. Maybe we'll take the conversation off air. Thank you so much for your time, both of you. Sarah, thank you very much for your courage, and thank you so much, Jabu, for those nuggets of wisdom and for your expertise That was Sarah Schneider, who has been diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression due to being alienated from her children 4 years ago.